episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome everyone again to another episode of our show. Today bringing you another really fascinating guest who's helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. A little background to today's show. We are going to be doing our first episode in an innovation segment that we have not yet touched on our platform. That's real estate, but I'm extremely excited to say that we are starting off at the very top with the largest real estate brokerage organization in the United States and have the honor of being joined by Nashira Layade, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer in Business Services at Realogy Holdings, who leads their technology infrastructure, security, operations, and support strategies for the organization. And for our ex-US listeners and viewers of the show, Realogy Holdings is an American publicly owned real estate and relocation services company. It owns a variety, as well as franchises, several different real estate brands and brokerages, including Better Homes and Gardens, Century 21, Sotheby's International, ERA Real Estate, just to name a few. And in 2020, supported approximately 1.4 million home transactions. They also offer relocation, lead generation, title, and settlement services. Most recently, Ms. Layade served as Senior Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer for Realogy, responsible for establishing and maintaining the enterprise vision, strategy, and programs necessary to ensure the adequate protection of their digital information assets and technologies, which are, quite broad. Ms. Layade's background includes nearly 20 years experience as an executive and thought leader in information security, data privacy, risk management for multinational Fortune 500 firms in financial services, media and entertainment, and the real estate business. Prior to joining Realogy, she served as an executive director for information security at Time Warner for nearly 5 years. And before that, served as director of information security for Prudential Financial. From 2005 to 2009, she held senior leadership positions at Citibank, including vice president and senior risk control officer. And prior to Citi, spent 3 years working as the global head of information security for Bloomberg. Ms. Layade holds a master's in telecommunication networks from Polytech Institute of NYU, obtained her bachelor's in computer science here in Philly at UPenn, and is also an alumna of the prestigious Phillips Academy Andover. A lot of very exciting topics to discuss, and we're glad to have her. Nashira Layade, thank you so much for taking time to come on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And this is, as I was saying, this is a really new topic for us, but I promise to ask you good questions. I'd love to start off typically, as we do on the show, just by handing you the floor for a little bit to talk a little bit more about yourself. If you can take us sort of back to the beginning, everything from where you grew up, when you developed these rather broad interests, not just in information technology, but also information security, and a little of that early career journey. I think that'd be a great way to start.
Sure. So I am the youngest of 7. I grew up in Brooklyn, this place called Ocean Hill, Brownsville, which is kind of like in between Brownsville and Bed-Stuy. In Brooklyn, honestly had no interest in information technology, information security, nothing techie my entire life. Well, let me not say my entire life. From like childhood up until about 15, I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay. And that's what I wanted to do. Like my dad is a retired bus driver. So when his work schedule allowed for him to have time with me in the middle of the day, we would sit and watch divorce court all day long. And I was like, I'm gonna be a divorce lawyer. I'm going to Harvard, blah, 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 blah. And so it was either in like 9th or 10th grade, and my best friend and I decided to go to the college fair, and all of the upperclassmen like looked at us and laughed like, why are y'all here? But it was at that college fair that I discovered what an amazing artificial intelligence program UPenn had. And so I was like, okay, this like AI thing seems kind of interesting. And like back then it wasn't AI, it was like artificial intelligence. Nobody really knew what the heck AI really was. But I was still like lawyer. And my father, we were like talking, and he was like, listen here, little girl. The United States produces enough doctors and lawyers. You are really, really good in math and science, so you're going to be an engineer. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'll be an engineer. In the summer between 11th and 12th grade, I participated in this program at MIT called MITES, minority introduction to engineering and science. And I decided at that time, there was no way in the world I was going to be a hardcore engineer. And so I was like, let me figure this out. So loved Penn, loved the fact that it was only 2 hours from New York, loved the fact that it wasn't a New England winter, because Lord knows after 4 years in like the Boston suburbs, I hated that. And so I applied to Penn, I think as a physics major. But yeah, I did apply to Penn as a physics major because I loved physics. And the summer before I matriculated, I was like, okay, comp sci, here we go. Because like Google was like the big thing then. And I was like, okay, I'll do comp sci, like Penn has Wharton, so I can get some really good business classes. Yep. And that's one of the things that I so much loved about the school, that I had the ability to do both the engineering and the business. And the summer between junior and senior year, I was placed in a cybersecurity department for a summer internship. And that's what started my career. It was completely random. And it was something that I absolutely loved. So I had started at Telcordia Technologies, which is a Bell Lab company. And I pretty much, through the grace of God and hard work and having some really, really great mentors and bosses, was able to really like navigate my career relatively quickly. And I've been at Realogy for what, 5.5 years? So what is this, 222. So I started Realogy at it's gonna be 6 years, 2016. Sorry, my math isn't working so well today. So started at Realogy in 2016, as you mentioned, as their CISO. And then October of 2020, I was asked to assume the position of Chief Technology Officer of Business Services. And that's pretty much been my career in a nutshell.
And it's been a fascinating one. And yeah, I really appreciate that background and the journey. I'm getting into these tech topics. It's going to be really exciting. But before we go there, okay. I just wanted to ask you if you could so I'm sitting here in the home I bought, 20 some odd years ago. I'm not in the market right now. Talk for a little bit, if you would, just to, we've been obviously been sitting the last couple of years of COVID, of course. What's happening that's interesting and exciting that we should know about in real estate? Obviously, real estate is a business, but on the other hand, the last couple of decades, my wife loves watching real estate shows. It's entertainment. It's politics as well. We don't hear one night on the news, we hear about all these people from X are moving to Y and Y to Z and so forth. What's happening in real estate in 2022? What are some fun facts that we should all know about?
Fun facts. Well, it depends. I don't know if it's fun based on if you're like staying in your house, you're looking to buy, looking to sell. But I just to back up a little bit. So I would say, like, if we think about the onset of COVID, the pandemic in March of 2020, no one would have ever expected the pandemic to shift what it shifted. Like, I'll be honest, I was like, oh, this will be over in 3 weeks. Who the heck knew, right? Yeah. And so from a real estate perspective, it really turned the market into an aggressive seller's market. So, if you think about the onset, those of us or some of us, right, who are city dwellers, it was like, okay, I don't want to see people. I don't want to be around people. So you had a mass exit from urban areas to suburban and rural areas. I know, like, being a native New Yorker, it was like folks were flying out of Manhattan like crazy. And so you had that, you had low inventory. You had really, really low mortgage interest rates. So it really, truly propelled itself to being an aggressive seller's market. And then outside of the pandemic, you then take this whole concept of like the hybrid and the virtual work environment, which literally means for most people, you can pretty much work from anywhere, which then led people to start to consider, well, where in the heck do I really want to be in the country, in the world, which then led to another series of, movement and, further exacerbating like the seller's market, right? So that was like 2020, 2021, that kind of continued. 2022, it's anticipated to remain still a seller's market, still with an increase in prices, but probably not as aggressive of a spike as what we've seen in 2020 and 2021. So I would say still a really great opportunity. I would say when I think about it, right, if you're someone who is trying to buy and or sell in this market, you really do need the help of a really great agent or broker, especially on the buying side, because things are flying off. But when they do become available, they don't stay available for very long. The prices, like, someone can list their house at 500. I'm just going to throw it out as an example. And people are coming in with offers at 550, 565. So you really have to have a trusted advisor with you to help you navigate all of that. And that's where Realogy comes in, as you stated in the opening, being the largest provider of real estate services in the United States in 2020, having been involved in 1.4 million home transactions. We really are a leader in this industry and can help navigate, especially considering what this year is probably going to bring as well.
Got it. And I want to say thank you for laying the scope there. Now I want to, you are Executive Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, and when I was sort of going into my background research before the show, your parent company has over 200,000 agents across its various franchises. You have over 11,000 internal employees, and they are your internal customers, but you have the world, which is your external customers, your US-based organization, but I understand you have operations in the UK and Singapore. What do you do? What is your job all about? And sort of talk about who you're, obviously not all of those millions are your clients, but they really are. Talk a little bit about what your responsibilities are in any given day.
So I'm going to answer the question in two ways. I'm going to speak to you about who Realogy overall technology and data services, and then I'll speak to you about my specific role. So again, with Realogy being the largest provider of real estate services in the United States, we have a plethora of clients. So Realogy's technology and data organization, we provide innovative technology solutions to our agents, to our brokers, to our franchisees, then also internally to our employees, but then also to the real estate client, right? So we think about at Realogy, there are three stages to quote unquote home ownership, right? You buy, you sell, and you own. And for us, while our primary client is the agent and is the broker, we understand that the longest relationship there is with the homeowner. So as we think about like our technology solutions, we want to provide technology product suites that allow us to interact with the homeowner or the home buyer throughout the entire phase, right? So that's overall technology and data. So again, we provide services, agents, brokers, primarily franchisees. My side of the house is on the internal employee side and somewhat with our agents. So my team, we are responsible for cybersecurity and data privacy. So I will say we have the absolute best cybersecurity team in the industry, right? Like, we protect the data, we protect the assets, we monitor everything, and we have been lauded by external vendors for the strength of our program. I also am responsible for infrastructure and operations. So that's making sure the network is reliable, our systems are reliable. We are responsible for our cloud strategy. And at Realogy, that's critically important because we have a cloud first mindset, which is we like to develop in the cloud first. It assists us with increasing our innovation and getting our products to market faster. Also under my direct responsibility is our IT service delivery. And so that's what you would consider a traditional service support organization. So we support clients, we support agents, we support our products. So that side of my organization is the largest part of my organization. And then lastly, I have digital operations. And so what that entails is our digital workplace experience to make sure we have the appropriate technology tools within our hybrid/virtual environment. That also includes our business process optimization team, and their entire focus is on simplification and optimization. How do we do things as one organization despite the variance in our brands? And then also in that team is our IT financial management team. So we manage the IT budget. So that's my side of the house. And then on my co-CTO side of the house, he has product, data, and engineering. So a lot of our intelligence, all of our product delivery, that would be on my co-CTO side of the house.
Fascinating. And now coming in for your side of the house, which is very extensive, you have, I've seen you write and be interviewed previously. You're very focused on the important trends that are taking us 2022 and beyond, technology. And you mentioned artificial intelligence before when you were talking about the days at Penn. We talk a little about artificial intelligence on the show in areas like drug development, healthcare, things of this nature, the ability to sort of look at these vast amounts of a genomics data and crunch it down and try to understand patterns and so forth. Walk us through a little bit. Obviously, you have a tremendous amount of data coming in your organization, hundreds of thousands of reps, customers, and so forth. Talk a little bit about how you use tools like artificial intelligence to crunch and really find the important trends that I've heard you talk about in the past, help to basically make this agent-client relationship stronger and more efficient.
Absolutely. So there are three areas we're kind of looking at. One is how do we enhance the human experience with AI? How do we remove biases out of our data? And then how do we expand the use of data? So I'll start with the very first one, which is how do we enhance the experience with AI, right? So if you think about the real estate transaction, and as I had mentioned earlier, the most critical, like your realtor or your agent is your critical advisor, right? So if I am a top agent and I have hundreds of clients or I have a large metropolitan area, yes, that direct one-on-one client relationship and that human interaction is very what drives my business, but I cannot sit and talk to 100 different people at the same time. So how do I use AI to help facilitate certain things? So AI for us can be like a virtual assistant. AI can be, how did we take processes that were driven like on site, like when we were pre-pandemic, and how do we use AI to speed up, to give us better intelligence and more accurate data as we've had to digitize standard business processes? We think about how can we use AI to further expand as we look to continued virtual environments, right? And then lastly, how do we use AI to optimize social media marketing, right? So let's just take like, if I'm an agent and I advertise on Facebook, how can I use AI to help me determine who are the clients that are really truly looking in this area? How do I create a stronger partnership with them to increase my leads and therefore either a home purchase or a home sale, which therefore is revenue? So those are different ways that we're considering using AI, like on that whole first human interaction aspect. Then the second one that I mentioned was really regarding the biases, right? Because yes, AI has a ton of data, but how do machines analyze that data? And especially if it's data that's based on quote unquote, the majority, right? So in the real estate perspective, if you consider where the real estate market is headed, that based on industry data right now, it shows that over the next 2 to 5 years, that diverse populations will be leading both home purchases and home sales. So if we're having data that's based on a quote majority and it's not considering everyone else, then in a sense, we're having biased data, which is not leading us to the best business decisions, giving us the right analysis that we need to really serve future markets. So that's another aspect that we're looking to with AI, making sure we have clean data or more generalized data. And then lastly is the expanded use of integrated and smart data, right? So I define big data as having large data sets and you have a way to analyze patterns and predict trends. So how do we use that to expand what things we should be seeing, right? So how do we combine both data and usage patterns, again, how do we expand this data to help us drive leads, consider where we should really truly be focusing our marketing efforts. So here are different ways like, that AI is used in the real estate industry.
And you mentioned before, obviously during the pandemic, you've done a lot more in the virtual world. The last couple, actually the last several months have seen, a lot of action on this front, not just sort of virtual reality per se. We talked a little bit about augmented reality on the show, but of course, and then you mentioned Facebook advertising before, but they introduced the metaverse a couple months ago. What are you foreseeing? Obviously, hopefully we're coming out of this pandemic soon and we're going to get back on the street looking at houses, but have we gone to a place where, some of these tools are going to be replacing for the foreseeable future, home tours and so forth? And what excites you in terms of some of these tools, whether they VR or?
I think it really truly depends on your buyer, right? So when I think about Gen Z, and I don't think they're old enough yet to be purchasing homes unless they're like uber wealthy or a celebrity. Okay. But if you think about them, that's probably the generation that's going to be like, do I really need to sit and go in a house and touch it and feel it, right? Millennials are starting to pick up, because honestly, millennials aren't that young anymore. I think millennials start at like 80, which means they're pretty much 40. Yeah, 42-ish now. And so that's where the largest demographic of home purchases comes from. So they have a heavier use of technology and the blend between the use of the technical tools and that agent relationship, right? So millennials are probably more using technology, not necessarily for like the home view, but more like the mortgage process. How do I expedite certain things, right? Boomers are boomers, right? Like my parents are boomers. There is no way in the heck in the world, like when my parents were purchasing their house in Georgia, and they were like, no, we have to go. I don't want to look at it on somebody's website. Like my father is very much like, oh, but it's not going to show me where there's a crack in the ceiling. I need to physically come into the home and view everything. So I think how technology will be used in the real estate industry is very, for me at least, generational. From that demographic perspective, it's going to be differences based on the generation and based on the user. But you asked, what am I excited about? Yep. I am excited about when the Gen Zs come in. I am passionate about these, for lack of a better word, these little kids, because they're not kids. I apologize for that. But like I look at my son, and I remember it was one time he was like 5, and he was in New York with my parents because I just needed a break. And my mother calls me and she was like, oh, his iPad has a glitch. And he was like, Granny, I got it. And it was like, she's calling me. And he was like 4 or 5 at the time and already knew how to fix it. And the stuff, like he is my reverse mentee, my reverse mentor, because the way he interacts with technology is completely different than how I interact. And so as they start to come into the workforce, I cannot wait to see what these young, brilliant children or teenagers, what they start to do with technology and how they start to use it and integrate it in ways that I don't think any of us, I'm assuming you're somewhere around my age, would ever be able to conceive.
I completely agree with you. Complete agreement on that front. But going to, though, the other end of the spectrum now, and I'd love to, you talked about AI and smart data. One of the themes that, well, actually, we had it on the show a couple of times because we do focus on the sort of the trends in the older populations, this theme of sort of the smart home and sort of aging in place, and the fact that, as we get older, my mother, she doesn't want to be in an aged care home. She wants to be in her home, and her home has to get smarter and so forth. Obviously, these technologies are sort of coming online slowly but surely, but I'm just interested, based on, your experience with artificial intelligence and all this data, what are you seeing in terms of the home side of things with some of these new technologies to create the smart home in the future?
I personally find it absolutely fascinating, right? So all of the different things that can happen within a smart home. But for me personally, It's not in my house, right? Because I'm a
Okay.
big like privacy person. So there is no Alexa. There's, my son has Siri with his iPhone gadgets, but I don't want any parts of it because one of the things that I don't know if most people are cognizant of, the devices talk. They're always interacting with one another and they're reporting someplace else out. So yes, it's cool for my refrigerator to tell me, hey, you need to go buy some milk. But when I start to get advertisements from Whole Food, like, and that to me is like where I'm personally get uncomfortable. But back to the question about like general population. Smart homes are here to stay. I know that there are tons of companies who have all types of things from like your security, like I had mentioned before, to like your smart appliances.
Yeah.
All types of things. So I think, and I know like Realogy, we have researched how do we partner with some of these companies as we look at, smarter homes. And I think that it's a great point you brought up that for our older population, how those things are really, truly helpful and may become critical for them, especially if they choose to continue to live independently as they age.
Very important theme. And now just linking back in, obviously, you have an amazing experience with all these tools, but you also have this amazing career prior to Realogy in terms of security, information security at some major financial institutions. And it just got me thinking, I was sitting around thinking of your expertise. And then, I can go outside, my car is outside, and I can unlock that car standing next to it, but I can technically unlock that car now from the other side of the world with my cell phone. Same goes for hotel rooms, homes, and so forth. I just want to come a little bit full circle based on your sort of these dual set of experience that you have. Interests, concerns, thoughts for the future in terms of the cybersecurity component of all this smart stuff and where we're going in terms of the future?
I would say the cyber side, if you're dealing with like smart home technology and it's a leading vendor, then the cyber side is probably safe. It's the privacy side where folks have to be mindful of that. If you think about, I think about like, okay, my alarm system. And when I signed up for it, it tells me all of this stuff. Did I read any of it? Chances are I probably didn't. It was like, click, click, click. I need you to just work. And it's the privacy side that gets people more in trouble, less on the cyber side. But about the whole interaction, one of the things that I love, which is what drew me into cyber, like I was stating in the beginning, is like the intersection between business and technology, right? And I think about what more personal business can anyone have besides for the purchase of a home? For the vast majority of us, your home purchase is one of the largest financial transactions you'll probably make, right? And so when I think about that, from start to finish, you're exchanging and transferring a ton of information, right? So when you're trying to get your pre-approval to your mortgage, to, communicating with your agent, where you want to live, do you have kids, is the school system important? This is all a ton of data, right? Going back and forth. And at Realogy is really critical for us to provide awareness and training. Well, training for our employees, but education and awareness for our agents, for our brokers, for our franchisees, but also for our clients, right? Like, if you think about those of us who are not technology focused, and how often are we scamming through an email and it's like, oh, click this link, and you're not paying attention. So you click the link, somebody gets access to your email, and then all of a sudden your wire directions are all mixed up and messed up. And like, that is the worst thing in the world, right? I won't say life savings, but for some folks, it is their life savings, and it disappears on a wire transfer. And so this for me is what makes cyber critically important in this industry. It's just like the vast majority of the data is so confidential, it's so sensitive. And like I said before, it is the largest, for some folks, one of the largest financial transactions. So not only do you have all of this sensitive data, then you have this money. And then if you have it with an organization who's not taking cyber seriously, it's a ton of mistakes that can be made.
Unfortunately, they're the Nashira Layades of the world that have to think about how to solve these problems because they are vast, and it's extremely impressive just listening to you think through these issues and keeping us all and our data safe. So that's quite impressive. Nashira, so in addition to overseeing technology and security and operations and support strategies at the largest real estate company in the United States, and taking care of a family as well, you are involved in many other initiatives, and I'd love just to profile some of those.
Sure.
You are on the board of the Girl Scouts of New Jersey. You're on the YMCA of Greater New York board. You're involved in an organization called iMentor. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing on the front with the children.
So I believe that I'm supposed to use my position and platform, no matter where I'm at, to be a change agent for good. I had started off by telling you, I grew up in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, which is in between Brownsville and Bed-Stuy, right? Mm-hmm. So if I think about the precinct that served my area, which is the 73rd precinct, I remember I had went to a poetry, there's this place in the city called New Eurekan, and there was this one woman poet, and she happened to be from Brownsville too. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go check her out. And my niece and I went to go check her out. And my niece is a Harvard alum. And the woman starts out her piece, talking about how the 73rd precinct has the highest crime rate in all of New York City. And I lived there my entire life, didn't know that, because for the most part, we grew up in the house. I had friends on the block, but it wasn't hanging out. But anyways, I'm bringing this back to being a change agent for good. So I think about where I grew up at, and had my parents not forced me to be educated out of that specific area, what would my future have been? What would my present be, right? And so I think about the children who don't grow up in the suburbs or grow up with affluence. Mm-hmm. And how can I use in my spare time, my energy, again, my position and my platform, to mentor, but mm-hmm. also to provide a pathway for access to equity. Yep. And that truly is why I mentor. I don't do it anymore because I don't work in the city anymore. But when I worked in the city, I would mentor. There was a young lady who studied at a high school that was a 5-minute walk from Time Warner, and worked with her from 9th through 12th grade. When I started with her in 9th grade, she was like, I don't want to go to college. And she ended up going to Borough Manhattan Community College, which hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. I had influence. If I think about Girl Scouts of Northern New Jersey, mm-hmm. It's just empowering young women. Seven Roses Legacy Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of my sorority. They give scholarships to young, I think you have to either be a resident of Brooklyn or Queens, and they give scholarships, and I make sure I donate heavily to try to have some type of influence. So again, for me, it's all about being a change agent for good, and that's what drives me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And flipping that around, Nisha, you spent time obviously in academia, working for some of the largest entertainment and financial services companies. Talk a little bit, if you would, about some of your mentors. So who was really there that kept you on this path? And really, I mean, it's just an amazing rise through the system and where you are and what you're doing now. Who helped you along the way? Who are some people you want to shout out to? Please.
I'm laughing because I've never, until last year, had a formal mentor. Okay. What I do, I remember, again, back to the wisdom of my father, he would always tell me, it's better for you to sit down, shut up, and observe people than talk, and be in the mix. So that's how, honestly, I've gained a lot. I I sit and I introduce myself, but I sit and I watch and I look and I say, okay, that's characteristics I like. That's leadership that I would like to exemplify, but also leadership I don't want to exemplify. I've had, for the most part, I've been blessed with some phenomenal bosses, but I've had two scenarios where they were like, oh my gosh, like soul cringing, skin crawling, like the worst thing on managers you could ever have. But I learned the most from them about things that when I ascended into quote unquote management, to not do behaviors, to not exemplify. So I learned from both sides of the house. I follow a crap load of people in different types of industries, like Bazoma St. John. She is the chief marketing officer at Netflix. She fascinates me. So I follow a lot of her stuff. What is that guy who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? John something, something, something. I forgot his last name. Okay. But I follow him. Like it's just different people who, if you have like a leadership style, then I kind of like look at it. And then I would say like Realogy CEO in the last year and a half-ish that I've had the opportunity to work under him, I've learned a crap load from Ryan Schneider, a ton. So again, it's just me taking things in, trying to figure it, like assessing how can this help me? How can I use this? How can I change and navigate my leadership style?
Absolutely. What's hot for 2022? Where, what are you going to be? Should we be watching for you? Conferences, TED Talks you may be giving. Please take the floor and let us know what else we should be looking.
I can't even answer that question because we are at January, what's today, 18th, 17th, 18th?
Yes, 18th.
And I haven't even thought that far, especially with Omicron, Flurona, Deltacron, and everything else. I have not even thought that far out yet. I'm sorry, I can't answer the question.
That's okay, but we'll be watching you nonetheless because it's you have such a fascinating story. It's amazing just thinking about the sheer amount of your responsibility for this organization, everything else you've been involved in. Is just really extremely impressive, and just going to be rooting you on as you continue this amazing journey. For everybody that is going to be listening to this episode across the podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Nashira Layade, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, Business Services at Realogy Holdings. Nashira, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while. Obviously, thank you for everything you're doing there on the amazing technology front, the innovation side of things, everything you're doing in the world of mentoring. And thanks, we say on this show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through ushering in this new generation of possibilities. Really, really great story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.